Watch this. No way!
I probably played it twice a year for 6 years, and it's a fun distraction. But I first heard of it because guys from the senior cup team, Jeff and James, would go and practice their chipping there, and Bernard Langer used to practice his putting there because the greens were so good.
He used to warm up there for the Irish Open, didn't he?
That's exactly it. He would go there and chip and putt and hit wedges into the greens. Well-known story. Like, he wouldn't be seen in Portmarnock from Monday to Wednesday, and then he'd turn up.
I mean, it's how I tuned up for my time at Portmarnock. So, Darragh, a massive welcome to the Cookie Jar podcast. I think friends before guests, which is a rarity in a small few there of actual friends of mine before they've joined the podcast. Usually I try and befriend them afterwards. So a massive welcome to you. I'm trying to think when we first hooked up. We're probably looking back in, September last year. We played together at Blackwell.
September 2020, I believe. 2 years.
Magical weekend at Blackwell.
That was brilliant. I was just reflecting on it recently. You guys were very kind to invite me over, and I kind of tacked on another couple of games. I went to Little Aston and Hollingwell. So I had a magnificent time, but I was in Little Aston with Ian Burns, who's a regular, big-time listener of this pod. He's the general manager of Little Aston, and I was completely overserved with too much hospitality there. And then I jumped in an Uber, circumnavigated around Birmingham, and ended up with you guys a little late. And we kept the golf nerdery party going in that end. But that was the first time we met. And then, as we said, we had a wonderful weekend there. Simon Haynes, Sam as well.
It was a watershed moment in my golf career. I felt like we'd reached real golf nerdery when we were trying to pick apart which architect from the golden age would you go for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with. And I think we landed on, if I'm right, breakfast would be Colt, because it would just be more of a sort of a pedestrian conversation, something quite safe and steady, whereas Simpson would probably lunch quite hard. I think those were that was the general takeaway.
What wasn't said at the time was any architect who would have encountered breakfast, lunch, or dinner with us that weekend wouldn't have fared well. I think we spent most of the weekend. Did you ever hear that phrase, sitting with your shoulder blades into an armchair because you're so stuck into it?
Just couldn't get out. There was just no exit at Blackwell. And I think that's to be fair, every time I go to Blackwell, it's always the same there. A bit of an introduction for our listeners, if you would, Darragh. So Dublin born and bred, or
no, Limerick's southwest of Ireland. Limerick, about 2 hours from Dublin. So I grew up there. There was a golf course across the road from my house, which I grew up playing in. And then I joined another golf club in Limerick as well. An older parkland called Limerick Golf Club, and the first one across my house being Ballineety Golf Club, or Limerick County. So then I went to university in Dublin in Trinity, and kind of was afforded, and it was complete by chance. You often look back on things and wonder how things would have panned out if you went somewhere else and didn't meet the guys you met on the golf team in Trinity. Because at that age, I feel golf can come or go, So met great guys there. I didn't know of the link between Trinity and Portmarnock when I went to Trinity, but it was magnificent. I was called up for a game in my first year and never really looked back. But prior to that, I would have been, when I was 14 or 15, I can still remember perusing golfwrx.com and getting into matrix Osick shafts. And we were just talking before we came on about FCMing, frequencies of shafts.
Can we just break this down quickly, because I'm not going to allow you to skip past any jargon here. We are going to get to Corballis, but can you just break down FCMs, because I still don't understand this Project X 7.0, Dynamic Gold 7.0, whatever this means.
Yeah, just for the listeners, before we got on, we were chatting about, I've just switched to X100s from Project X 7.0, and I was explaining how the numbers are really irrelevant. There's the overall frequency is the stiffness of the shaft. And for example, 7.0 is not a 7.0 frequency. It's probably like a 7.5 FCM, whereas a Project X 6.5, I think FCM's out at 7.1 or so. I know you're more of a ball hitter and you're not interested in these technicalities.
I'm amazed at the vortex you go down, but I think it peaked when you told me that you keep a matrix of all the different shaft profiles and the various FCMs, just so you know what you're dealing with.
If you don't have that, you don't know where.
So you were kind of a bit of a gearhead, and then kind of the The architecture came a little bit more late, would you say?
I was
Because
a
I,
gearhead.
yeah,
Yeah, I was a gearhead, Sam, but I remember emailing Ran Morissette at golfclubatlas.com, which is obviously where people find their architecture interests at about 16 or 17, wouldn't have posted on it. And that's a pretty heavy place to kind of read about golf courses. But that's where that picked up. And I would say that when I got to Portmarnock, like theory is one thing and reading about golf courses is one thing, but I wouldn't have played much links golf as a 12 to 18-year-old, besides Lange maybe. But getting up to Portmarnock, getting exposed to all that, I remember meeting club historian at the time we passed about 5 years ago, Tim Healy, who wrote the centenary book in Portmarnock, and that stuff. You talked about watershed moments earlier before we were just there when we were chatting, but that was probably a big moment for me. I kind of realized that there was probably more to golf than the parkland golf I'd grown up playing. Links was completely new to me. The history of the game was completely new to me. So it took on a different meaning then, I'd say. And when you combine that with all the great guys I met in Trinity and continue to play golf with, and it's kind of become multi-layered and more enjoyable all the time, I'd say. And then meeting guys like you, lots of good friends and spin-off groups and everything. It's been fantastic. So
it just gives and gives, doesn't it? The game. Just back to links golf there. You touched on it. Obviously, we're not going to talk too much about Portmarnock in this podcast, but we were over for a few days and we enjoyed playing Portmarnock, at an incredible level. I love the place. You'd always bigged up the turf there and the impact of fescue and the fact that it was such firm ground. Possible comparison with East Lothian, but the ground even in May when we went, which was not a particularly sort of baked out time of the year this year when I was over, it's really, really firm. Like it's so fast, it's so fiery. I remember playing the 10th there and being on the right side of the fairway and you saying to me, yeah, you've just literally got no shot now. Like you're not going to hold the green from here. And you were right. But, how much do you think that plays a part in then all of a sudden appreciating architecture? Because all of a sudden you see how contours behave rather than just, aerial attack on every single green.
Yeah, now you've said it. Like, for example, when I first joined Portmarnock as a university member, I didn't even understand what the bounce was or how to interact with the turf. It took me literally about 3 years to get cut. I remember in a competition when I joined as a full member then, it was like a different type of golf. It didn't actually feel like the golf I played before, taking beaver tail divots on a parkland golf course. But I think then that when you marry it with, as you said, what becomes angles and strategy, it takes on a completely different meaning. And I think it's almost a separate game. I've often discussed this with people compared to parkland golf. I know we're going to talk about Corballis a lot. But you said about fescues and things like that. Like Portmarnock is built on an aquifer, so it's got a layer of basically semi-permeable rock underneath, so it drains completely. When you were over in May, that March and April were really bad weather. There was no growth, there was no rain, so it wasn't even playing particularly firm, which was interesting. And now it's kind of blossomed because fescue obviously grows so late in the year, so it's absolutely blossomed now. It blossoms pretty much every September, October. But it's built on an aquifer. There's only two types of grasses you want growing on a golf course in the UK now, and that's basically any type of fescue and then brown top bent. And we have that in abundance on the peninsula. We're really lucky with that, and we don't have anything else out competing it. We just have to deal with a little bit of whatever we get, rogue bents or creeping bents. So it's a natural environment for fescue. I'm probably at 95% on the greens, which is magnificent. So that's, as you said, it is a great environment for golf. It's completely different, and it makes angles, as you said, like the 10th green in Portmarnock is just a hole that gets me every time I get to it. It's
just sucking you down the right, and there's just no future because everything's sort of stacked against you at that point. But when we were joking earlier about going for lunch with Colt or Simpson or whatever. But the early guys, when they were laying courses out, even before their era, pre-1900s, somehow just knew where good golfing land was. It was clearly understood about having good turf, which is a brilliant segue, I think, into Corballis, because Corballis is great golfing land still. It's nowhere near as firm as some of the best links courses you'll play, but there's undeniably great golfing land there. The greens are rich, they roll great, the dunes are magnificent. I get the sense, I've only played it once, that it drains particularly well and it offers golf all year round. And yet it's kind of a funny story in so much as, the people that have used the links over time have seemingly just abandoned it over and over again. Like in a little bit of research for this podcast, I think golf's been played there for sort of 100 years plus now. And I think two or three clubs had kind of established a routing and a course, and then sort of moved on to a bigger site further inland and chosen to play parkland golf instead. But the land at Corballis is absolutely ideal for golf, right?
Yeah, so I was going to give you a little bit of history. You're right, golf has been played there for, I think it was 1907 or something like that. But it's kind of the municipality of Dublin, really, or the county council took it over in the 70s, I believe. And when I was doing a little bit of research on it as well, there was a great clip on Vimeo of one of obviously the local politicians kind of opening it, and it looks exactly the same dune system that we looked at when you came over in May. But it's this municipal golf course on a stretch of land, which is pretty much the same as the Island golf course. It's a well-known neighbour, but Corballis is €25 to play. I think we paid 21 when you boys were over because it was post 5 p.m. It's so hard to describe how good it is, and if you want to show someone how chaotic in a way, but how brilliant it is, you could start by saying it opens with a par 3 where you ping a ball across the 12th fairway and doing so in the beginning. The second is par 4 of 240 yards where, and usually this wouldn't be a good look, but you're pigeonholed into hitting a 9-iron and then a sand wedge. The giant crater between where your 9-iron drops and your sand wedge is going to go over. And then the stretch from 3 to 7 and these were the rerouted holes, I think, when Ron Kirby came in 2007. So that's what I forgot to mention. It was reopened in 2007 with substantial work along the 3rd to the 7th holes, which are really the jaw-dropping holes that people kind of talk about. You're looking out across the Irish Sea, along this same vistas as the Island and Portmarnock, and that stretch from 3 to 7 is as interesting as golf as you'll see anywhere. The land the holes move along is thrilling. The fun we had when you were over, the reveals at each corner, the drop shot par 3s, Sam, the 4th and the 6th. They're just 100-yard downhillers to cramped greens.
It's death if you miss. Like it's death. Like, you know, you're in the bunker, you're short-sided, there's no room. They're cramped, aren't they? Everything's tight and more intimate. It feels like you're playing I don't know, it's a dreadful example, but it's almost like someone's just really shrunk down Trump Aberdeen into like a sort of a factor of 25%. So everything's cramped. Those 2 par 3s are like, I remember playing the first 7 and thinking, right, I think I've more than had my €21 worth at this point. It's frightening.
Now that you mentioned about the size of the greens, there's obviously a bit of a kind of a vogue at the moment for large undulating greens, even on some of the shorter courses that are being built. For example, I don't know, what's Brandon Preserve is 13 holes. Some of those kind of new courses that don't have classical 18-hole routings. But Corballis has really actually used very small greens quite successfully. Like, they don't look out of place. It's probably a little bit unique in that regard. I still remember, like, Cooper, how much he enjoyed the stretch of 4, 5, and 6. Each reveal, each little bunker he was looking at. I think that's as good as anything. It's certainly, we're going to get onto this in a while about maybe how you could improve on what comes after it with a little bit of shaping of the routing or that. But it's utterly magnificent. As you said, you felt you had your value at 3 to 7 alone. And the 3rd hole obviously is a wonderful par 4 as well.
Yeah, it's a tough one as well. I mean, the second, that short par 4, it's classic stuff. You look at it, it's about 250 yards. I seem to remember we'd had so much hyperbole about Corballis on the WhatsApp before we got over there that I even took to the aerials and said, oh, this will be a straightforward, just 3-wood, just knock it down. It's like, no, you hit 3-wood onto the second, you're never going to find that ball again. You've got to just hit the layup and then take the safe shot onto the green, haven't you? But it even stood there, I was like, you're only here once. You might as well just shell a pill on this one.
Yeah, I'd like to know what your first impressions of it were when you got to the place, actually. Like, I like the feel of it the way it is. And again, we're going to get onto what it could be or what it should be. But what did you think initially of the impression of it? As I said, you start off hitting across the 12th fairway, which is interesting. Again, it's probably a pitching wedge. But what did you think when you got out? You've done a little bit of research, but what were your overall impressions?
Look, so first impressions, you walk into the clubhouse and there's almost no one there. It's quiet. It doesn't feel like it's busy. And this is in a time where clocks have moved into summertime now. You know, people you're thinking who work in Dublin, why aren't they going out and playing 9 holes in the evening? So it's quiet. There's a few youngsters out there going and playing a few loops and stuff, which is great to see. It's super chilled. The guy runs the pro shop. There's the TV on the lounge. Everything's just super chilled. So you get there and you just feel immediately at ease. It's kind of exactly what I thought it would be. It's a municipal course, relaxed. you get out of the car and you think, wow, look at this land. This is exactly where I want to be. You almost can't believe that I'd only got off the plane 20, 30 minutes earlier, because it's only about 15, 20 minutes from the airport, I think. So, anyone that's flying out of Dublin and just thinks, oh, maybe we could squeeze a few holes in before we get the flight back. Or do you know what? There's not quite enough time to play golf on the day we arrive because we're not going to land. And, I don't want to play a 7,000-yard golf course when we get there. It's the perfect warm up. Like, do the Langer thing, like get there and just tune up a little bit. So I thought the vibe was absolutely on point. As you say, you go into the most thrilling part of the course early doors, don't you? You play those opening holes, and you're just sort of like your jaw's on the floor. You're almost not ready for it.
Yeah, there's a certain kind of a vibe to it where sometimes you see with great golf courses, like if you look across Hoylake or Muirfield, you kind of feel isolated. You can't see much of a golf course. You can see swathes of land and dunes.
Yeah.
But it's like a narrow swathes of green surrounded by native grasses, a couple of trees and bushes. But for all intents and purposes, it could be anything. And that's what Corballis looks like when you get out there. It actually looks like it could be anything. You have to pick out the golf course in it. And something that I've become kind of cognizant of recently, like just how much it looked natural, how natural it looked, how brilliant it looks. It's like it's far from a great big green blob, it's which a lot of cheaper golf courses can look like. So it's brilliant from that perspective. You did say that. I agree. Like it's got its charm. It doesn't have too much amenity inside in the shop. We had to go down the road for a pint in Balcarres Golf Club. They've no Guinness tap.
Yeah, there's another golf club literally over the road. So in between the island, which you border on the back of the seventh tee, there's another golf club literally 50 yards down the road. And there were great Guinness in there. We had great pints in there, but
they need to rectify the lack of a Guinness tap ASAP. But
they're missing such an opportunity, aren't they? I mean, we're going to come back to this. We're going to come back to it. So I think we can come up with three things that would just significantly transform Corballis. But the value, the fact that when you get there, it's undeniable that you booked a tee time for 20 or 30 or 35 euros. It doesn't matter. Like, you're in for a good day the second you get out of that car.
Yeah, just like it's just for the listeners. I don't know if we said it. It's a par 66, 100 yards. But it's chaotically brilliant. Like I often use the expression, me and you when we're texting, will say, not playing chess or checkers. I don't know what Corballis is. It's more like smoke and mirrors, isn't it? It's a different universe altogether, and it's absolutely intoxicating in its own way. It's magnificent. You were asking me before we came on about what kind of exposure I've had to it. I probably play it twice a year, and it's since I came to Dublin many years ago, and it's the most fun you can ever have. And just for the listeners there as well, Bernard Langer did come to it every single time the Irish Open was in Portmarnock. He used to tune up for the short game purposes at Corballis. Now, it used to be said that he used it for putting because the greens were so good. Now, when we played the greens, as you can understand, it actually does get a lot of play. It's a huge amount of play. So the greens were kind of lush and kept a little bit more receptive because golf would probably take forever there. When it gets so busy. So it's a little bit different now than it was then when he was coming around. But apparently the greens used to be tabletop, like you were rolling an egg across a marble tabletop.
Why would that be? Because I had the same experience the other week at Almouth Village. And again, that's a sort of, incredibly low cost operation to run that. And yet the surfaces were incredibly pure. There must be something that's just part of that land, in the same way that the land that Portmarnock's based on being rich in fescue and brown top bent, there must be something in the DNA of the land that enables them to just have carpet like greens, because they can't have the infrastructure or the budget to be overseeding them all year round, right?
No, they definitely don't. But Sam, Corballis is the start of when you get out of Dublin. It's like the first train stop. Well, there's a train stop about 10 minutes inland of it. It's the first train stop in a series of where there's actually really good links courses that tourists wouldn't really know, like Laytown and Bettystown, and then people know Baltray. But it's a great spit of land the whole way up. Like it's not that far from Portmarnock, and I just mentioned how lucky we are in Portmarnock with our, all of the fescue we have and the aquifer there, and how much natural sand we have, and all these places have the same stuff. So they're blessed as well as we are. So that probably goes a little bit of a way to explaining what they have there, But like there's not much unspoilt, I think, in golf these days. And I'm not sure. And when I was thinking about how we were going to approach this, like Corballis is 30 minutes from Dublin city and 20 or so minutes from the airport. So it's not really unfound. It is busy. It's a members and locals course, and it is jammed. I know it wasn't busy when we were there in May at 5 p.m., but it can be jammed during the summer. So what it is it an undiscovered gem? Probably not. It's probably more complicated, I think. It's a busy locals course. Um, we're probably going to talk about what they could do with the routing.
No, but just lingering on that, like you say, like that it's busy. It's busy. You've got a good thing. Demand for golf in Ireland must be in the same state that it is over in
Huge.
England. Like there's an insatiable demand for golf. And I think, I'll probably put it on the pre-roll of the pod, but when I flew over to Ireland to play with you, I meant to take the podcasting gear with me because I'd flown, if you remember, from our spring meeting that we'd had a few days before. Tom had disappeared without the microphone, so I had no assets to be able to pod. And then we've just sort of kicked this down the road for ages. And I thought, well, on the basis that Eric Anders Lang is going to release a film about Corballis, it'd be neat to do a little pod to go alongside that, for a bit more stuff on Corballis and a bit more kind of discussion around the course. And you think, well, I suspect the Cookie Jar podcast is probably not going to blow demand for Corballis out of the water, but the film from Eric Anders Lang 100% will. Like, that's going to be big. So then what do you do with all that demand? Well, you then bring in more investment. You start to bring in a professional architect. You start to charge more for green fees. It's like you almost want to try and keep the purity of the €21 magic that's going on there. It's like you almost want to sort of cocoon it away from the rest of the real world of golf. It's like you said there, very few places are no longer kind of spoiled.
Yeah, and I was wondering if we're going to have an argument over this, because I was going to say you bring new problems with expansion, don't you? Like you become a prisoner of expectations almost. I was like, because the potential for that land would obviously be it could be anything it wants to be, Sam. It could be a course where you bring Americans and add it onto the island or charge X, Y, and Z for it. But if you look at like a teleological explanation of it, which is basically like what it exists to do, look backwards at it. It's there to give locals magnificent golf at cheap prices. So you change the ethos of it if you go after that. You don't. It's like it's not in the same basket as any of the places that were undiscovered in the outer corners of Scotland based on geography and accessibility alone. It is, as I said, 30 minutes from Dublin, but it just happens to be this members course and locals course since 2004-ish. They started taking members. So it's very different. Like it's a affordable price golf and a melting pot of very expensive world-class links that essentially surround it. Now, those links around it are anywhere from 7 to 10 times the cost of Corballis, probably, and 10 to 15 times.
Yeah, like what's the island next door? Like €250 to play, something like that.
Yeah, and like the island of Portmarnock are all in those and north of that at this stage. But the golf and class isn't 7 to 10 times at all. That's the thing, Like it offers insane value for money. That's why I was so keen for us to go there when we were seeing Portmarnock, seeing Baltray. I said, this is an absolute must play. And it really is. Now, how they deal with that demand, which is brilliant, is another thing. And, as you said, pressure in golf is going to be enormous. So they can only benefit from it. But it's just such an interesting, slight problem to have.
We're seeing so much of it over here now. Clubs have all of a sudden come through COVID with, really buoyant finances. And you're seeing a lot of clubs with a lot of money out there. And the danger is you can give clubs too much scope for investment, and you can take away from the purity. Like, I mean, I could start reeling off examples, but it's just, it's almost like you say, you want to kind of just protect it from the need to go and chase and feel like they need to do the right thing. When we talked, go on.
I was just going to say, I think that Corballis, like courses like Corballis, have really been very in favor in rankings of late, and GB&I particularly. But there's probably a lot of courses that in the £75 to £100 range that I actually feel have been a letdown, not because I found them poor golf courses in any way. They're all very, very good, but because they didn't justify the price. And I'd say Corballis is literally a peer to many of them. It's quirk, but it's quality, And I actually think it's really is a peer of all those courses. So I think that they have something in their hands that is just utterly magnificent.
You're a great commentator on the game, Darragh. So like, I've tried to pose this question a few times. If you go out for dinner with a real big wine buff, the wine buff will not just go to the bottom of the menu. They will hunt out what they think is the best bottle of wine in relation to the price that it's on the menu for. If you look at the golfing tourist, they will invariably just operate purely from a ranking basis. Why?
Well, you see, rankings, we've often thought about this. Like, rankings are, I think that they give cause to speculation. If someone asks me about and obviously I read rankings and I find them interesting at times, but I'm not going to speculate on whether I find course X or course Y better than each other when I've played them both twice or both once, and it was raining once and it was sunny once, and I had a great day with two of my pals one day and I was rushing for work the next day. I much prefer, and I didn't think we were going to get into it, but I much prefer thinking about golf courses as 5-star, 4-star, whatever. I just think it doesn't do anyone or golf courses any favor to be involved in something like this. But I started that by saying I just think that Corballis is the peer, at least, of many golf courses, which are in that bracket and above price bracket. Now, negatives, I do think there are a few holes tacked on at the end that we discussed, and some in the middle that would make Corballis possibly favorable for reduced hole routing, like a
100%.
less than 18. Yeah, so like 8 to 10 is a little bit of a weak stretch. Then you come back to a magnificent drivable par 4, the 11th. I absolutely love that golf hole.
That's the one that goes around to the right.
Yeah, Cooper. We thought Cooper had pushed that, but he actually drove it. Remember that?
Yeah. It's huge. You play out onto that. So that's an incredible golf hole because you tee out and there's the fairway's almost domed, isn't it? At about 200, 220. And if you go a smidge long or a smidge left, you like fall off down the left and you're playing up into like a really severe raised green. I mean, like, the topography of the land is extraordinarily severe throughout Corballis. Like you're constantly playing up and down levels. It's like sort of Super Mario with your golf ball sort of thing. It is. It's like, okay, I've got to get 30 feet of elevation on this. Oh, I'm coming down 40 feet now. So that 11th, which hooks up to the right. And I seem to remember I did the thing of going long and left off the tee to the fairway and then left it at the back of the green down a treacherous slope. It's just like, it's a fast track to a bogey. It's a brilliant par 4. And then you play 12, which is the long 4 or something, or is it a 5 that hooks to the right?
12 is 5, but the 11th green is the place where you we're looking at the holes that aren't holes. You're kind of looking out along you're looking over the whole property, basically. Well, the northern stretch of the property there. And you went down to one of the par 4 greens in the distance, or possibly the par 3s. You put it up on Twitter anyway. It was holes that aren't holes. And we all kind of unanimously agreed that was absolutely incredible, from the 11th green to, I think it might have been the 14th.
13. Was it 13, the par 3 up the hill?
That's exactly it.
That's it. Another stunning little par 3. Again, 30 feet in elevation. The green on 13, I was just not ready for how severe that was.
That was where Cooper missed a legit 1-footer that swung about a foot to the right. Remember that?
It's incredibly severe. I mean, it's like you say, it's so provocative.
Yeah.
It's not somewhere you'd play card and pencil golf. It is a match play course in its purest form.
What did Freddie Tate say? I was reading some Hoylake history the other day. I care not for the score game. I think that's where you'd have to get on board with Mr. Tate there. But I just don't think you have to be so prescriptive about routings anymore. Somewhere like Corballis is genuinely primed to take advantage of a shorter routing. Mentioned Bandon Preserve is 13 holes. I haven't seen that course, Portmarnock or whatever it is. Is that 10 holes up in Scotland? Iceland, there's an architect in Iceland who does, because they have a less of a history of golf, obviously there, so they don't really buy into the 18-hole thing. They have loads of 12 and 14-hole golf courses. You could walk off at the 12th green at Corballis beside the clubhouse on a massive high, and that might be the sweet spot for a half day or whatever time spent at Corballis.
Well, you want to leave them wanting more, don't you? It's like, it's always better to leave people wanting more. And the width, the second stretch, that kind of 13 to 18 is not poor golf by any stretch. That's certainly
No.
not what we're saying. But you reach the 14th green, which again sort of plays out now out towards. Would that be the north? I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
So kind of going the other way that you've moved from the first sort of few and then looped back around to the house. You then head back out and you reach the 14th green, and then you can kind of see you visibly move into a different bit of land. You play 15 and 16, which I think are they the wrong Kirby holes that just sort of go up and down on each other.
Yeah.
And it's almost someone's taken a very literal definition of getting to 18, of being like, the exam question is, I've got to get 18 holes into this because that's what golf courses do. And it subsequently obviously throws a couple of sort of second rate holes into the mix. And then you place 17, 18 home, which again, back into the kind of similar land that you've been playing through. So there's 100% scope to reduce it.
Well, you see, I suppose a lot of architects would look at something and say their mission statement is to get to 18 holes and then kind of figure the rest out. But and I suppose the land at Corballis is so good that lots of people will be inclined to do as much as possible with it, expand it, put in maybe, if you had a little bit more land, par 3 courses and all this. But I honestly think that shrinking Corballis would be something that would genuinely be to its advantage. And I think the character of the place, it's almost redolent of a time before tourist influx to links courses. It's a little seaside town where Irish people from Dublin in particular, before air travel really became something, where people used to go on holidays. So they drive an hour or 40 minutes outside of Dublin and go to all these seaside towns. And the simple clubhouse, the convenience of everything to the first tee. I think there's no doubting you could make the routing better and make it more social with some simple changes. And you kind of have to be sympathetic to what purpose it serves and its character. It's a first sort of a rural stop out of Metro land in Dublin, So I think you have to bear all that in mind. So I'd be in favor of shrinking it, keeping its character, rather than going the other way, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. I think comparisons are hard to make with Corballis. For example, Cairn. Obviously, I don't know if you've got to Cairn.
Never been to the west coast of Ireland.
So those new 9 holes were built by a Portmarnock member, a pal of mine who doesn't really trumpet it too much. He's great guy, Ali McIntosh. But it's like a fully grown Corballis, and it's got the land, it's got the size. It's a mix of tourists and locals, which is kind of harmonious, and it's wild. I think that's what Corballis could be like, harmonious. Maybe it's always going to be busy with locals. It can probably take in some other type of golfer, visitor, tourist, but it can never really be 4 balls of Americans going out. The day we were there, Sam, you mentioned this, was so nice because you saw there was a guy going out on his own who was kind of clearly a beginner, a single, and then there was a couple of mates having a 3 ball of pals having 9 holes of golf. It has to remain what it is to everyone, so that's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. It's maybe a little bit more nouveau, this whole concept of and maybe it has taken a few places like Preserve whatever to be like, oh yeah, do you know what, because 12 holes is now like the new cool thing, isn't it? But it's like there's got to be some truth in that. It's time's kind of getting more scarce. The whole course could just operate brilliantly as a 12-hole facility. I had a slight idea. I think when we were there, I was like, I think we were kind of getting a little bit carried away with ourselves on about the 11th hole. I was like, God, can you imagine? We should try and get hold of this. This could be it for Ireland. Like we should 100% try and buy this. I think we're getting very slightly carried away with ourselves. But I had this idea that the first hole could be a warm-up hole. I quite like that idea. The fact that you could have, I just take that concept out of the context rather of Corballis. The idea that you could have a completely free swing at a golf ball as a first practice hole. I quite like that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think at a similar time, I'd mentioned starting on the second. I hadn't come up with the idea of a practice hole, all right.
Just gets you to the second tee then, doesn't it? It's 150 yards. There's no need to walk it.
Yeah.
Tee a 9-9 up, hit your shot. Don't even need to putt. Just walk to the second tee and you're
The routing has to keep the 17th green. You remember the 17th green? the wildest green you've ever seen in your whole life. Like that is pure magic. That's 21 euros worth alone, I think.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of negatives. I'm going to ask you if inside the actual golf course, like from even a condition or an architecture point of view, my standout would be, I think negatives would be, it's only a minor thing, is the bunkers. I thought that a lot of them probably aren't particularly well positioned. I think it's the sort of course actually where they should probably be thinking in the other direction. They might be able to get rid of bunkers. Like there aren't many bunkers at Corballis you're entitled to carry or enticed to carry and get a reward for it. So I pared them down in number. I think it's a course that could actually benefit from less bunkers in general. That was one thing I was thinking about. But
yeah, I can get on board with that. I think we've played a lot of courses in England where bunkers are entirely secondary to the holes and the makeup, but seemingly the club has just felt like kind of like the 18-hole thing. It's like we need to have bunkers. Can't seriously have a golf hole that doesn't have bunkers. When you actually can, you go and play Baltray up the road an hour, and it's like, yeah, they're like 3 or 4 holes that don't have bunkers are probably the best golf holes on the course there, like legitimately.
Yeah.
And I think they're just there almost by legacy. It's back to that point of like probably why you've got 15 and 16 there, because, you know, 18's a better number for a golf course to be than 16 holes. And I think the bunkers are the same. I was totally in love with it. Totally and utterly in love with it.
It's absolutely magnificent, isn't it? Like I thought it's hard to convey it, I really think. Like I know we've been texting for a while and shooting messages back and forth about where we go and what we do, but I was pretty confident that you guys would really, really like it. Like Cooper was like a child at Christmas, really. Like when he was falling into that bunker at the back of the 6th. Like I have pictures of Cooper taking pictures of that bunker, which is
yeah. He's in love. But like, there's so much to fall in love with it. You can't lay a glove on it. The one thing it needs is a Guinness tap. It's like, how can you not have a Guinness tap there? I mean, it's an own goal, isn't it? Surely, like we can keep the cost of golf at 21 euros. I think if we put the Guinness tap in, we can probably get the golf down to 15 euros.
Yeah,
we can then shut it to anyone that's a non-Dublin resident, and then it becomes an exclusively local proposition.
Yeah,
but it's like, how does that place not sell booze? You know?
Yeah. So the Guinness tap is number one problems. The lack of a wine list is number two. Maybe some of the Blackwell wine cellar can be loaned out to Corballis. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I can imagine.
For the member guest, maybe. So what would your best comparisons be? This is another tricky one I was thinking about. I won't put you on the spot, but I thought the only one I could think of is Gullin 3, which is 15,100 par 68. I know who played it with Hickories recently. I think it was Andy Johnson, maybe, or someone like that. But Gullin 3 is seen as, it's obviously on a property with 3 golf courses, perhaps seen as a kid's
Gullin
course.
3 feels so much longer.
Yeah.
Like it feels like I mean, obviously you've got to get up the hill at Gullin, so that takes like 2,000 calories out of your system immediately. But so I've definitely not played a course that would compare to it. What I know of Khan, I can totally get on board with that. I think I think there's elements to the way the course plays. Maybe there's recency bias in here, but Almouth Village, it's like the purity of the green surfaces and what you imagine to be a fairly similar operating budget, and a lot of the restraints around the holes and stuff is kind of there. The topography of the land is totally different. There really isn't a comparison for me, and I think that's probably the biggest positive of all this. Is like, if there was another Corballis, like I definitely haven't found it. Now, Sam Cooper on Links on the Road, who's probably played 250 links courses by now, he may well have a few. I can imagine you could go up to places like Durness and you could start to experience places that might, but even then they wouldn't have the dunes and stuff. It's a tough one. It's a toughie.
And they're not sitting between high level, like they're not sitting between Portmarnock, the Island, and Baltray. They kind of have to grapple with what they are as well, And this is where you begin to pose questions about a place like Corballis. Like, should it be taking Americans? Should it be charging triple the green fee it is? But if you add in all these visitors and clobbered up to the nines and on their trip, the dichotomy becomes wrong. It's not one thing or another. It's neither fish nor fowl, as people would say. So it's a tricky one. I just think you have to just love it for what it is, an absolutely chaotic, brilliant golf course. That the stretch from 3 to 7 alone is worth it. And I'd implore people to come and see it for that alone, really, Sam. and you can take a breather on some of the other holes, and you get back to the 11th, and the 12th in its own way is a cool hole as well. Dogleg right, par 5.
Yeah, 12's good. 12's good. 13,
12's good.
like I said, a great par 3. Quite
Yeah.
enjoyed 14. I think we pretty much wrapped it at 14 because I think
Yeah.
we just caught up with some 4-balls. So we managed to skip 15, 16. I think we might have hit some shots up 18. But it's like if you've got an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever, and you can just kind of squeeze away slightly early, you definitely do not need to budget 3.5 or 4 hours in for a round at Corballis. If you can get on the tee at the right time, and you're quite happy knowing that, when your time's done, your time's done. You just got to walk off the course. You could, even if you got 5 or 6 holes in, you guarantee now it's a Sam Williams guarantee. You've had your value for money at that point.
Yeah.
I could have quite happily walked off the 5th green and been like, that was still totally worth it because those 5 holes were insane.
There's a few other golf courses actually along that same stretch of land that I haven't played in years, but like there's Rush and Lusk. There's all these seaside villages up the coast. They probably have similar land and are really interesting as well. But where else can you come 30 minutes outside of a major city, walk along dunes land like that, look out to Lambay Island and Ireland's Eye, look down at Portmarnock, down at the island, enjoy pretty much the same turf, and some insane shot quality and shot value. So I think that's a good place to finish on. Corballis, probably chaotic, wild, beautiful, really. I should probably go there more. We'll have to go next time you come back. We'll have to go again.
There's no chance I'm coming back to Dublin without playing Corballis. It's physically impossible.
Well, then I succeeded. So
like take that as a given.
Yeah.
Just bringing it back to the game in Ireland a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot more in Ireland of things like pitch and putts, quite popular, I think, versus kind of maybe England and stuff. I get the sense that municipal golf's quite big. You guys have, I think, take amateur sports way more seriously than we do over there, and I think that's a great thing. Like, there's such a big thing. I remember when we played. In fact, I might have even name checked you on a recent pod with Matt McLean, actually, the US Mid-Am winner, was talking about it and saying like this whole like seniors and juniors thing. Like, there's a really big thing around amateur golf, grassroots, municipal golf. State of the game pretty healthy from that point of view, do you think?
Very healthy. Yeah, it's actually an interesting point. I suppose just thinking about it there, like the 2 biggest sports in Ireland that, aside from, we'll say, soccer and rugby or whatever, are the Irish Gaelic games, football and hurling, and they're amateur games. So even at the highest level, you watch them on Sky Sports, they're amateur games. The Irish have always been, I suppose, in love with those, and a lot of people as well who play hurling will play golf. But kids growing up here will play all sorts of golf. Or all sorts of sports, and they'll give golf a go. It's available to most people. It doesn't really have the same class distinction, I would say, that it has in other countries. So we're really, really lucky. Like, I wandered across to a golf course across the road from me. There's no barriers to it. Picked it up, and it's incredibly healthy, as you can gather from listening to me most days. And following the amateur game here is just an absolute delight. And following some of my pals just gives a lot of us so much pleasure, Like, a lot of the guys I went to Trinity with have actually doubled down on golf since they left, got better, much better, even really good competitors. And I think that's kind of unusual, actually, for a group of guys to leave college, put more time into golf, get better at it. Like, a lot of them were good at golf. And some of them were good.
They didn't go to university like you would go to Yale, or like you would go to Oklahoma with basically just studying, but you're going to play golf. These guys have just like fallen in love with it through the university scene.
Yeah, but they were good players. They were good players playing off scratch, +1, whatever. But they were good socializers as well. So they were both things in the golf sphere. But now they've doubled down and got a lot better. Like, it's like an Indian summer, it's actually been really interesting to be a part of that. Like, you learn so much from those guys just by hanging around, by osmosis, even, and some of the guys in Portmarnock.
You've kind of walked into it, but amateur golf, you're quite keen on amateur golf. Walker Cup in particular is a particular specialist topic for you.
Well, yeah, I think it's
actually... Is it the purity?
Yes, it is. I think that started probably when I joined Portmarnock, and they have obviously hosted a Walker Cup in '91. That was the first Walker Cup to be held in September, I think, as well. But I think there's a massive record book in the hall in Portmarnock that they flip the page on once a day. And I think when I was at university, I remember I wouldn't have known much about the Walker Cup. And I think I remember they flipped the page onto 2 big pages about the Walker Cup that day. And for whatever reason, it resonated with me. I just think it's such a pure form of the game. It's so enjoyable because you can, as you know, I follow a lot of my pals like Jeff and Richie and Darragh, lots of guys who play high level amateur golf, and it feels like you have something like you're kind of living and dying with them. So I suppose a lot of my interest in amateur golf came from watching them play amateur golf. So I think there's a beauty in someone who's toiling outside of work doing that or whatever, you know. It just resonates completely different with me. And yes, I do, as you know, really enjoy the Walker Cup. Still working on a few missing programs. Yeah.
I should tell a story. I tell it to everyone when I talk about you, which I talk about you far too frequently, to be fair. But it's usually because you have good stuff to say. I think when you came to Blackwell, when we were at that members and guests weekend, I'd sort of shown you around the clubhouse, and I'd sort of shown you Tweddle Cleek and Dr. William Tweddle, who obviously captained the Walker Cup side in 28 for GB&I.
Bill Tweddle.
The opposing captain was Bobby Jones.
Yep.
And I sort of said, you know, actually Bobby Jones then played at Blackwell the day after he won the Open Championship at Hoylake in 1930. And you were like, yeah, no, it's quite interesting. It's funny enough, the 1928 Walker Cup Chicago, it's one of two programs I'm still missing from my collection. I thought, okay, we've got ourselves a golf nerd on our hands here. This guy knows his onions.
There was actually a good story. I remember when I started kind of collecting the programs, a lot of them are easy enough to get on eBay, like the 70s and the 80s ones, whatever. And there's another guy in Portmarnock, Donald Quinn, good pal of mine, who was also collecting them, but I didn't know about that. I knew Donald, but I didn't know he was collecting them. And at some stage, I'm not sure how, but it became obvious that we were betting against each other. And I remember texting him. I was like, are you bidding on a 71 would have been 71 from St. Andrews, actually. What was that? The second time GB&I had won it in whatever, or first time in 37 years and the second time since 1937 or something. And he was like, yes, I am. And so then we came up with a rule where whoever had bid first on something was allowed to keep bidding on it. The other person had to withdraw solemnly and give up the ghost. But yeah, I do enjoy it. But I've come to, I still have a few missing, but we'll get back to it.
Which are the big ones missing? Because there's a really good listenership to this podcast. You never know, Darragh, that we might receive an email here with someone very keen to give you the 1954 Wingfoot one or whatever you're missing.
Yeah. Actually, the only modern one I'm missing is actually Brookline, I think. So if anyone has that one, I think I had a lead at one stage, and I'm not sure where it went, but I definitely haven't that one. I think Donald Quinn actually I just mentioned beat me to that one, so he probably has that. So that's about the only one I'm missing in the modern era, I believe. I've got duplicates of a lot of them, but it's I collect a lot of club histories as well, architecture books, things like that. So it's really interesting. I think they're great to flick over, coffee table books, even lots of that stuff.
100%. It's part of the, it's like you were saying, I think at the top of the pod, is like the layers and the dimensions of golf, and the fact that the more you immerse yourself into it, it almost becomes this sort of ever expansive game. And it's like you realize that actually you don't need another Peter Millar polo. You actually don't need another quarter zip. Like 4 or 5 of those things is probably enough, but actually a club history is pretty unique.
When we first met about 2 years ago, and I came over and played Hollandwell and Little Aston, I played Hollandwell with a guy called Nick Jones, who is their Greens chairman, and he's a retired surgeon, but he self-published their history. He's a guy who just is incredibly invested into it. Probably had a little bit of time in his retirement, but just so well intentioned. He's a brilliant Greens chairman. But self-published the book and that sort of stuff, really, I had an incredible day with him. That would have been 2 days before I met you guys. It's so good to see that sort of stuff going on around the place. And I mentioned earlier at the top of the pod as well about meeting Tim Healy when I was a university member. He was the guy who did the centenary book in Portmarnock, published in 94. We've obviously had a 125 book published since. I think I sent you over a copy of that, did I?
You did indeed. It is the most remarkable book, I was just about to say.
But guys like that are just, they give so much to clubs. Like Tim Healy had probably been collating bits and bobs for 40 or 50 years. You don't realize how valuable that is until you're looking for something or whatever. You're looking to see who won a cup in 1952, and it's all there laid out. Some guy's been tapping away at it forever. We've just established a heritage committee in Portmarnock, and one of his relations is on it now, so everything comes full circle, And
yeah, of course.
We talk a lot about that, and talk a lot about still look at his book and all that sort of stuff. So,
and when it's gone. This stuff, you've got to keep the chain going with these things.
Yeah,
in terms of your eBay purchases, are there any kind of big regrets in there? Any that you're thinking, God, I wish I got that. I really backed out on that, and I shouldn't have done.
I don't know. I'll
Because you
probably go
can
the
lose your
opposite.
mind on some of this stuff, can't you?
No, I'll probably go the opposite way, only Sam. Like I bought like really. Bruce is often very entertained by this. Like, when I brought some. What was it? I bought a really stiff like 4 or 5 10 TP that was belonged to a long driver. And, like, the thing is just like literally a rebar, like it's a lead pole. Like you use it as scaffolding. Like, so I was actually looking at it before I came down. It's up in the bedroom there. But no, lots of regrets, but they're not missed things. They're probably things I bought. God, what do I have? I probably have a set of 681s, X100s, brand new. They're probably the best thing I ever bought. Really enjoy those.
We can scrub that out. Sponsored by TaylorMade here, Darragh.
Fair enough.
I'm certain there was something you told me once. Was it Ken Venturi's master?
Oh, it's Ken Venturi's personal master's blanket. That came up because someone in the WhatsApp group, remember that, put in something about missing something, and I said that the biggest regret I have is not bidding further on Ken Venturi's personal master's rug.
I think it's a fairly good insight into the type of character we're dealing with. I want to close, if it's all right, by just talking a little bit of agronomy.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously, in your capacity as chairman of Greens at Portmarnock at the moment, you work full time. There's a lot on in terms of trying to support the club through that sort of stuff. How much has doing that been an education in agronomy, and how much of it is actually pretty common sense?
Yeah, I suppose it's actually an education and a privilege, really, because what I get to do is, as you said, I'm doing that in 2 years through a 3-year stint. I basically get to tag along, watch our brilliant links manager, superintendent, whatever you want to call it, Gary Johnston. He's been with us since 2007, and he has slowly and steadily polished a diamond, really, with Portmarnock. Like, as I said at the top of the pod, we're on the northern half of a peninsula, which has a huge amount of fescue, high proportions of fescue, permeable rock. It drains brilliantly. We have all our own sand reserves, so we're blessed with a lot of good. But Gary has really just kept fine tuning things. I get to go along for the ride. I get to learn so much from listening to him on basically a daily or weekly basis. Do a lot of course walks, probably 3 or 4 times a year. But I also get to tag along when Ali Beggs and Richard Windows come over, who help us with our agronomy. Ever since we did the British Amateur, the Amateur Championship in 2019. So it has been, I would say, to me anyway, it's probably not as much common sense. It's been very data driven. I've learned an enormous amount. It's been a real privilege. I've learned an awful lot probably more about like organic matter profiles than, like, I suppose the fescue stuff is common sense. But if I do anything, I would actually say, aside from that, it's acting as a communicator between Gary and the members, just keeping them abreast of what we're doing. You don't want the members blindsided by anything. So what I've kind of tried to do is be a good conduit between Gary, the members, put out kind of semi-technical information in newsletters, missives, memos, whatever you want to call them, just so that they're well informed. And I've lost count of the number of times that really interested members have come back to me with something really useful, fed back to me after I put out some kind of communication. So that's what I really like. And I put out a lot of stuff that I've learned, as I said, about fungicides, pesticides, organic matters, and clegging, and which I know you get a good laugh out of the clegging.
I like you. You're a big fan of the clegg hammer, aren't you? And no, but I'm a big fan because actually what you say is actually I can kind of get on board with it.
There's layers to the clegging though, Sam. Like, the clegging was one of the first things that I understood and learned from Gary, that you could obviously quantify firmness. So he gave, like, if you give me a little tool and tell me how firm a green is, I love it. It's 130 specific gravity, so the green is really firm. But then over time, I obviously got to learn a bit more that, like, you can get a firm green from drying it out, from starving it, measuring a bit of pogo or moisture mapping it. But Portmarnock's really blessed because you can keep the moisture content quite high. We'll say we can keep our greens clegging high at 120, 130, 140 with quite high.
Which is incredibly high, we should add. So
that
the
is
majority of parkling courses will never go above 100, will they?
No, exactly, yeah. And like most links courses will probably be 100, 110, 120. In a hot summer would be 120, 130. But I suppose the main thing is anyone can get most people can get the surfaces quite hard and bouncing. If you dry the greens out and get the moisture down to 3, 4, 5%, or cut really low as well. Like we cut at 4.5 millimeters. And if we go, we have natural pace because fescue gives you natural pace. Okay. So
how do you mean? Bring that to life.
like if you have a really clean sward of fescue, like a dominant fescue sward, you don't need to cut the grass low. You don't need to drop the mowers to 3.5 mils to get things really fast. Like it just gives natural pace. So you've got a perfect top layer of fescue. You don't have to
So
stress.
it's well protected. You know, I'm going to stress it at all, but it's just running. It's running fast.
Yeah. So if you can go to somewhere and green's running really fast, but what you don't see then is the payoff 3 months later. They've been drying the greens, they've been stressing them out a lot, and the greens are disease prone then 3 months later. So they've been good for 6 weeks of the year or whatever. Like we keep things that we cut at 4.5 mils. Our moisture rarely drops, probably below 10%. And the specific gravities of Clegghammer are still high. So we don't stress our greens. And as I was saying, fescue grows so late in the year that right now is actually peak time to be playing in Portmarnock and probably in other places as well, which are very high fescue. But like I suppose what we're really focusing on as well, and Gary started early. He's always ahead of the curve, but like the climate, like 2030 kind of initiative in golf, and that the RNA will be running, will be trying to mirror what's going on with climate change and apply it to golf courses to be more cognizant of sand and water and pesticides and fungicides. Like we have the same problems as other clubs have. How do we use water? How do we store it? We don't actually really have the drainage problems that other places have, obviously.
But you've got to find a way of storing it as well. It's hard to store it then, because if it drains well, it's like, where do I keep the water?
Yeah. But like we're so blessed. Like it's cheaper to maintain a brown golf course. Like all that fescue, and once it's brown, it means you have a deeper root system. Green and lush actually means the roots are closer to surface, more exposed. Really, like, yeah. So our native areas as well out acre or like outnumber our maintained areas, i.e. the links. So we've got wonderful flora and fauna. One of our members did a book on it.
I've got that one as well, actually. I seem to remember we picked that one up after a few too many Guinness at lunch. Yeah, I've got that one as well.
A bit of thievery there. So like we're
no, I purchased it. I think you probably paid for it though, actually.
I await your check in the post. So we're well on top of things like that from a climate change perspective, but that's definitely becoming a huge thing. Like how you like at some stage you'd wonder about sand in golf courses, where it's going to go. We've significant enough sand reserves compared to, I'd say, a lot of links courses, but at the same time everyone's running out of sand. We have probably a few acres behind the 15th green there. You'd wonder what's going to happen in 20 or 30 years, whether you'll be going to some sort of synthetic sand or whatever, but yeah, that's probably a lot of what I've learned is the day-to-day operations from Gary. He's been absolutely brilliant. Just
fascinating stuff like that. Like what you've just spilled there, all about the nature of like nurturing kind of fescue grasses,
like
things at like an optimal condition. That's mental. Like you're doing that as a greens chairman. It's quite interesting to see the level of detail that you're kind of getting into there. And a lot of clubs can learn a lot, I think, from some of that stuff as well. It's like, if you sort the ground, like the actual organic matter out first, then you're gonna make your life so much easier. And I think that would apply to a parkland course in the same way as it would a links course. Like the ground is absolutely fundamental to what you're playing on. It's not about making the greens bold and quick just for 3 weeks of the year.
Not at all. And nothing keeps an organic matter profile as good as sanding, and we've really fine sand. We're lucky at Portmarnock, but try and keep the organic matter between 3.5% and 4.5%. And I'd suspect most links courses probably found that theirs probably crept up. Like ours did a little bit, probably over, 5% because of relaxed sanding during the pandemic. And then you try and keep the soil pH ideal for fescue dominant turf, probably between 5 and 8, ideally between 7 and 8. And then all our sand is sourced on site. So we're really lucky at that. Our greens are probably 95% fescue dominant at this stage. Gary's been treating them.
That's high. Give us some context though. Is that?
Yeah, that is high. Like that is high. As I said, the whole peninsula is just a high grade of fescue. And now when we so where do you go from that? If you have a relatively high proportion of fescue, we still get a little bit of creeping rogue bent and a little bit of meadow grass, but tiny amounts. So how do you keep that out? You overseed with fescue again. But when we're overseeding now, because we're already so high, we're choosing cultivars or strains of fescue that are actually just, would say, resistant to dollar spot, which is probably a little bit of a fungus that us and all links courses struggle with. But we can be selective. We don't need general fescue because we have such a high proportion of it. So we go for a particular cultivar, a particular strain. Like what else do we look at? We've got a little bit of wear and tear from trolleys at the front of greens, just walk on, walk off areas. You'll see some meadowgrass invade. You see some dollar spot in the greens occasionally, but other than that, they're all really, really well. I think one of the things I couldn't believe when I first joined Portmarnock was how well they rolled in December, January, February. Like, it was such an alien concept to me.
It's kind of like Rye, isn't it? You know, again, that I wasn't prepped when I played Rye in December last year. We went down after our Christmas party and had a great day there, and just threw a few balls down to the putting green. And you'd expect them to stop on site. I pretty much degreened these things. It's like, how the hell have we got greens like this in December? And it's God given, right?
It's God given completely. Is the one thing that I've realized about places like Rye and Portmarnock and other places. But like, what was it? Team Sky Cycling came up with that marginal gains thing, and I often think that's what we're probably doing with Portmarnock. But Garrahy genuinely has made such a difference over the years. Like, we have taken out lots of trees. We really have improved the greens. We treated them again 2 years ago during COVID. You played the Yellow Nine as well. The
incredible
holes 19 to 27.
Again, I mean, it's another one of these. You know, it's like, it's always the case, but anyone that just goes and plays a championship course, when they go to somewhere like Portmarnock, it's like, you need to play all 3 nines, because
you do.
Yellow's really every inch as good as the rest, pretty much. And the greens are quicker. The greens are more tight, smaller as well. I'd say more intricate.
That was built in 1972, I think it was. So we just had a 50th anniversary. We had a special competition on last year to mark those holes. They were kind of entirely constructed. Well, a lot of the greens were constructed by the greenkeeper at the time, Frank Temple, which is really interesting. But it's so useful to have. We have 3 nines or 3 starting holes, all within a couple of 100 yards of the clubhouse, Sam. So that gives a lot of opportunity, even if it is busy at Portmarnock, to start. If you've got friends or family out, you can often pop onto the Yellow Nine and play 9 holes there. But we really are blessed with the environment. You love to see it go a shade of khaki. You just love when that happens, and the ball is rolling all over the place. And even when you guys were there in May, it was beginning to happen a little.
Was it the Walker Cup where it was completely baked out? Was it the amateur? What am I thinking of? There's an aerial picture where it's like, it's pretty much a Weetabix, the course at this point.
Yeah, that was actually, I think they had no irrigation though, or something at that time. But there's a picture from the Irish Open in the 80s, an aerial photo, where the thing is just like, it's absolutely baked to pieces. Yeah, there's great footage if anyone wants to look at the Walker Cup in 91. I don't know if you've done it. If you've looked at it, there's lots of footage of Mickelson playing a singles match on YouTube and from 91 in Portmarnock. It's well worth a watch. And there is some footage as well from the Irish Open from the late 80s. They had great winners, like they had Faldo won a few times. I think it was Olatabel, people like that. I think the first time someone ever got appearance money on the European Tour was Crenshaw came to Portmarnock in 75. I think I remember hearing that.
No way.
Yeah, so it's a long history of championships. It's been brilliant. So
Darragh, it's been an incredible podcast. I want to close. You've touched on the Walker Cup there. I'm going to pin you. And how do you feel about the Walker Cup next year? St Andrews. I think I went out on a limb talking to Matt McLean and said, look, seems to be some really high quality amateur golfers from GP&I at the moment. There's some serious players out there.
Yeah, like I'm so excited for him. Like, it's hard to quantify what Hugh Foley has done in Irish golf this year, how consistent he's been.
Would he be in for Walker Cup pick as well?
Yeah, I would imagine that he'd be front and foremost in anyone's minds, given the year he's had. I know nothing is guaranteed. Like, you obviously have to play some stellar golf next year. As you said, there's incredible golfers in Scotland, England, and elsewhere. But the year he's had has just been incredible to watch. His consistency, and him and Matt getting to the final of that US Mid-Am was just incredible. Really, the only 2 Irish guys in it. Magnificent.
No one, and an Irishman's never won it before. One incredible event.
Yeah, absolutely. So excited isn't even the word. And then Cypress Point in 2025. So it always goes to the best golf courses. It's incredible.
Well, Darragh, you said you were going to be one and done on this podcast, but I'm sure I'll talk you into a second appearance.
I'd
but I
actually
cannot
like,
thank you enough.
no problem, Sam. I'd like to come back with Bruce's auditing on board. I think I was telling you before we came on, I got new bats, and I was like went to Bruce for some good advice. He gave me an awful lot of great advice about my setup. So I think Bruce should be known as an auditor and an educator. So I think we'll have to come back for some further education, maybe.
100%. Bruce can take you through as his first pupil, and
Yeah,
we can see what that does to your golf.
two basket cases.
Darragh Garrahy, thank you so much. Corballis Links, what a place. And yeah, I hope you guys found that interesting. And thanks again, Darragh.
Great to chat, Sam. See you soon.
Watch
Bye.
this.